So you spoke a little bit about decisions, which, yeah, especially in college, we understand the difference of decision making. My question is, you were raised in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you grow up in Los Angeles?
Burbank in North Hollywood.
Okay. And what high school did you graduate from?
I went to a private high school.
Called?
It was called Yeshiva University of Los Angeles, private Jewish high school.
Do you know the demographics of that high school?
Upper class. And wholly Jewish. It was a Jewish high school.
Yeah. 91% white, I believe, if not higher.
It's not, I mean, just statistically, it's not possible for it to be 100% or higher. But beyond that, Jews are not all white, just so you know. In fact, half of Jews are Middle Eastern.
I'm not saying that it's 91%. I'm not talking about whether the Jews or not.
I'm married to a non-white Jew.
Okay.
Right, she's Moroccan.
So, and you went to a couple different colleges?
Mm-hmm. Well, I went to one, and then I went to law school, yeah.
Did you have to work in high school?
I did, let's see, did I have a job in high school? No.
Okay.
No.
And did you put yourself through college?
Yes.
Fully?
I paid my own way in college.
Good for you. Do you have any kids?
Is this going anywhere, or at the end you bring out my family and this is where is your life? My parents made a lot of very good decisions to give me a better life. I hope to make very good decisions to give my child a better life. I hope that you would personally make very good decisions to give yourself a very good life. Would you? Well, this question has now gone on longer than speech, so if you would like to get to the question mark, I'd be happy.
Sorry, you kind of interrupted me, so I'm trying to remember so I can say it clearly so you can understand what I'm trying to ask.
We're still here. Go ahead.
It's not working to me.
Well, then it wasn't worth mine.
Hi, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming here. I disagree with a lot of what you said tonight.
Good. That makes it fun.
I don't believe that being transgender means that you have some sort of mental illness.
Okay.
And I think that the majority of the psychological, national associations would agree with that. And I think that there's a lot of evidence that institutional racism exists and that it manifests itself in very real and negative and harmful ways.
Okay.
But I don't feel any violence or animosity towards you, and I would say that most of the people that I know might wish that you wouldn't spread ideas. They might wish that you wouldn't spread ideas that they find harmful and negative, but they don't feel any direct ill will towards you in any violent way that they would carry out. So I guess what I've been feeling throughout this talk is kind of this vast mischaracterization of the left as some sort of homogenous, violent, oppressive body. And I think that the majority of the people that I know and the majority of the interactions that I've had with communities on a larger scale have not matched that representation. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about the nonviolence.
So there are two aspects to the nonviolence, okay? And I think one you will agree with and one you will disagree with. So the one that you will agree with is the one that you've already agreed with, which is that you don't get to hurt people just because of what they're saying, right? This we all agree with. This is also the distinction. There's a reason I use the word leftist and not the word liberal. I think there is a distinction between people who are liberals and people who are leftists. I think that people who are liberals may disagree with me on politics, but they don't feel that they get to use force to shut people down. Leftists don't feel the same way. So that is an actual distinction. Now, here's the part where we'll disagree. I think that if you are seeking to use the government to cram down your particular vision of society on individuals in violation of their freedom, that this is an aspect of totalitarianism. Whether you want to shut me down or whether you want to, let's pretend for a second that I were a baker. And let's say that I'm a religious baker. I'm a religious person, so let's say I were a baker. And let's say that I don't want to participate in a same-sex wedding because I feel that that's sinful in my own religious belief. My belief is that's none of your business. The belief of most people on the left is that there should be legislation that forces me to cater to that same-sex wedding. By polls, this is true. So, now we're getting into dicey territory because now this does implicate violence. It implicates governmentally used violence. So, you can be, I'm happy you're libertarian essentially with regard to my speech. But when it comes to my behavior, you're significantly less libertarian than I am. You can do what you want. I don't care. but people on the left deeply care what I do in my personal life, that they have no right to my labor and they have no right to my services. So this is where the pedal hits the metal in terms of American politics, and this is where the pedal will hit the metal when the government starts getting more and more deeply involved. As far as the institutional racism, all I would ask you to consider, you can believe what you want, but I would ask you to consider this. Shouting institutional racism does not actually combat racism. You have to find individual instances, and you have to show me who the racists are so that we can fight them together. I hate racism. I think it's evil. But if you're just going to say institutional racism every time something bad happens, there's no way to fight it. I need a policy that you're proposing, or I need a person who's actually racist so that we can fight it together, or we can determine whether the policy is good. What I find really problematic is the virtue signaling that I see by so many people on the other side, which is, I don't have to give you the racist, I don't have to tell you who he is or what measures I'm proposing. I just say institutional racism, everybody cheers for me because that's an approved point of view, and now we move on with our lives. You haven't helped anybody, you've just made yourself feel better. If you want to have her respond, please.
Well, I think that institutional racism in and of itself, first of all, I would say that the majority of the people that do bring up institutional racism do also have solutions as to how to combat it. But
which invariably involve encroaching on other people's liberty. But yes.
Well, I would just say that there is kind of, again, I feel like you're painting a wide and diverse group of people with the same brush and saying that if you can't point to a policy or if you can't point to a person, then you're just wasting everyone's time. And I think that a lot of people are trying to point to policies, and while I think that the idea of pointing to a racist person is fundamentally in contrast with the idea of institutional racism, because institutional racism grapples with implicit bias in the society as a whole, or not like a ghost in the machine, but in individuals.
Unless you're connecting that to a policy, it's a cop-out. Because now we're ghost hunting again. If you just said to me, we have a problem in American society, income inequality, right, is a problem in American society. If you just gave me any problem, and I said, well, that's the Bilderbergs' fault, right? That's the fault of the Bilderbergs, right? It's a conspiracy, it's the fault of the Bilderbergs, right? There are all these conspiracy theories about the Bilderberg group. So let's say that it's the Bilderbergs' fault, or it's the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's whatever it is, there's some conspiracy out there. You would say to me, that's not useful because what are you even talking about? When you say institutional racism, it's too broad. You at least have to name me the institution. Which one is the racist one? Which institution is racist? Tell me which, so we can fight it, seriously, so we can fight it together. Just shouting slogans like institutional racism it's not effective. Shouting white privilege is not effective. I want to be on your side. I do. I want to fight racists. I think racist behavior is evil. I want to fight it with you, but I can't fight it if you're not showing me what it is. And we have to decide together if the policies you're proposing will alleviate racism or exacerbate racism. And it turns out, I think that a lot of the policies proposed by the left, I think institutional racism is usually a lever for proposing a policy that is actually unpalatable to freedom, and then castigating people on the other side of that policy as being in league with the institutional racism. The policies are good or bad without regard to words like institutional racism, is what I'm saying. Honestly, I'd love to sit down and talk with you for an hour about it because it's a worthwhile conversation, and I think we could actually get somewhere with it. But I think that slogans generally tend not to be particularly effective in getting us to solutions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everything that you have said to us today is true, and I'm sure everybody here understands you completely. It appears as though pretty much the fix is in. The low information voters are not us or most of our friends, although we do have these friends. And so
it's a bad move on your part if you do, but continue.
I have two points. Point one is, how do we reach the low information populace when we can't get around the media and we can't get the information out? And for those of us who have friends who are low information voting Democrats, who think they're Democrats because they don't understand what it means now, what in a sentence or two
This is the right question. This is totally the right question. Right? The right question is not what do we do about Obama. Particularly, the question is not what do we do about the criminality of this particular administration. The question is, how do we reach people? How do we talk to them on a level that they understand? And believe it or not, me citing the Arms Export Control Act is not going to do a lot of good with people my age who don't know that arms are not those things that Jillian Barberie has on her body. The answer is actually, nobody has spelled this out better than my mentor, David Horowitz. Nobody has spelled this out better. You have to speak the language of morality. You must speak the language of morality. The left wins because nobody on the left knows anything about politics. They know you're evil. That's it. They know you're a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe who hates the poor. Right? That's what they know about you. And it's not they think that about you. They know that about you. Deep down, they know all these evil things about you, which is why Thanksgiving dinners are always so awkward if you're unfortunate to have Jewish relatives or you have friends on the left, which are the exact same focus group. The answer to all of this is to speak in the language of morality. This is why I never say the government compels people to do stuff. The government does not compel people to do stuff. The government compels people to do stuff at point of gun. Why do I say that? Because leftists are scared of guns. Right? When we say the government compels things, people say, oh, well, compulsion. Well, that's just like taxes, right? No. That's somebody coming to your house in the middle of the night with a SWAT team, with a gun, pointing it at you and dragging you off to prison for not doing what they want. Right? That is what we are facing. Right? When it comes to the left, it's not, when we're such idiots, honestly. We were constantly arguing about whether our tax program is more efficient than their tax program. It's not about efficiency. Barack Obama gave the right answer to the wrong question, right? When he was asked in 2008, would you raise the capital gains tax, even if it means less revenue to the government? Would you raise it? He said yes, for purposes of fairness. Right? Even if it meant people were more impoverished, even if it meant people were more poor, the answer was yes, for purposes of fairness. Why? Because people don't speak the language of poverty. People don't speak the language of efficiency. People don't speak Mitt Romney's 57-point tax plan. You can't even name 2 points on his 57-point tax plan. People speak the language of fairness and justice and morality. They want to think that they're right and the other guy is wrong. They want to have a feeling of, in many cases, unearned moral superiority based on their opposition to things. This is why everybody was getting off ripping on Donald Sterling for being a crazy old racist coot. Did they accomplish anything? No. But they felt real good because they got to go around telling all their friends that Donald Sterling was a racist old coot. Right? This is what they do. So, speak their language. In other words, next time they say something like, I believe in the minimum wage, then you should say, why exactly is it that you want to put a gun to the head of a business owner and force them to pay something? Why is that okay? Why isn't that violative of basic principles of consent? Like you over here, you like gay marriage because you say that 2 men should be able to wed each other, but those 2 men shouldn't be able to do business with each other in a mutually agreed relationship? So if instead of them having sex, they were actually just, one was signing a check to the other to paint his car, then you're saying that's not okay? And that you're going to take a gun and put it to the head of one of them in order to make that happen? It's because you're a totalitarian. Right? This is the truth. The left is totalitarian. You don't have to feel bad about saying these things. And when you talk about the inefficiencies of the left's social policies in the inner city, who gives a crap? This is really, I mean, honestly, that no one in the inner city is thinking about, wow, this really is not very efficient. What they're thinking is there are a bunch of Tea Party Ku Klux Klanners out there who are going to invade their inner city and burn down their houses. Why do they think that? Because they're Democrats and apparently some Republicans, Thad Cochran, who actually have been doing this sort of stuff, have been saying this sort of stuff. The answer to that is that the real racists are and always have been folks on the left who wish to exploit racial division in order to pay off their cronies. The reason the education system sucks in the inner city is because the left wants to pay off its union buddies at the expense of black kids. The reason that the left has not done anything for the inner cities despite years of dominance in Detroit, the reason is because they wanted the violence. And it is about intent. It's not about effect. There was a really telling point in the 2012 election cycle when Bill Clinton was talking about Obama, and he said, the difference between Obama and Mitt Romney is that Romney is somebody who says that Barack Obama's done a really poor job. Barack knows he hasn't done a great job, but he feels really bad about it. This was an actual line, right? And people bought that because, and the polls show this. Right? 80% of people thought that Mitt Romney cared less about them than Barack Obama in exit polls. 80%. That's a majority of Republicans. Right? But when it came to policies, they agreed with Mitt Romney. But people don't vote with their heads, people vote with their hearts. So, Go after what people feel. Go after the language of morality. Socialism is not a good idea that went wrong, and whenever you hear Republicans or conservatives say this, it's because they have the IQ of a kumquat. Socialism was a horribly evil idea that went completely right. It went exactly as they thought it was going to go. This was the design from the start. Socialism is a fundamentally immoral, evil, unfair, discriminatory, and disgusting system that violates off the bat 3 of the 10 commandments, right? You don't steal, God, not government, and you shouldn't be jealous of your neighbor's ass, right? That's in the actual language, correct?
Yes.
Not the Bill Clinton language. So these are the terms that we should be speaking. These are the terms that hit young people, because young people nobody has the time to read all of the entire editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. Nobody does. Everybody's attention span is 5 seconds long. So if you can't make people feel good about being conservative, make them feel really, really bad about being leftist. You know why? They deserve to feel bad about being leftist. They're siding with an evil ideology.
In the beginning of your lecture, you said in passing, you said to disregard the last 50 to 60 years of United States history.
No, I said that institutionalized racism, Jim Crow, ended in the 1960s.
Okay, well, building off that, how do you expect to address today's issues while so easily dismissing the events that led up to today's climate?
So every history has impact on individuals, for all individuals. The question is, what do we do now? Right? Do we create discriminatory government policies that hurt when they're supposed to help? Or do we set a level institutional playing field with equal law for everyone, which is the ideal? The problem is this. I mean, you can pick any minority group in the United States, and most minority groups in the United States have had negative experiences at the beginning in the United States. You know, I don't like playing identity politics, but the fact is that there was a time in the United States when people of my ilk, people of the tribe, we were not welcome in country clubs, right? I mean, 70 years ago, not that long ago, 70 years ago, you know, my extended family was being murdered in Europe. Right, 100 years ago, my family was getting here, and well, 1908, 1907, they were getting here, and they had literally nothing and didn't speak the language, and they were treated badly. I mean, this is not unique. History is a nasty place. The question is, what are you going to do now to rise above that? And the only way for people to rise above their history, the only way to rise above the challenges that their parents and grandparents face, is for them to make individual good decisions. And what I see from the left is excusing people for making very bad individual decisions on the basis that history has been unkind. So if you're willing to agree, how about this? If you're willing to agree with me that people should make individual good decisions, like don't have babies out of wedlock, right? And there's no white man with a gun forcing a black guy to get a black girl pregnant and then leave her. It's not happening. Okay, these are people making individual bad decisions. Okay? If you're willing to agree with me that individuals ought to make individually good decisions, and that we ought to foster people making individually good decisions, and that individual responsibility is the key to encouraging people to make those individually good decisions, then I'm happy to talk about as much history as you want. But if history is being used as an excuse for people to make very bad decisions and then complain about the consequences of those decisions, I'm utterly uninterested.
Okay, no, if I could just
sure.
Question. There have been things throughout history that, regardless of the person's own actions, have not been able to been rewarded like whites have. And if you look at things like, I'm sure you're well aware of the GI Bill during World War II, how blacks, general infantrymen, were not able to get the same benefits.
Yeah.
So how can you say with the advantages of white people being able to accumulate wealth and the benefits throughout time, how can you say that hasn't put black people today at a disadvantage because of that?
It has put black people today at an initial disadvantage, but that does not mean that the rules by which they play are different than white people now. Okay, so the fact is that some people are born poor, and put race aside for a second, some people are born poor, and some people are born rich in America. Right? We can acknowledge this. Some people are born poor, and some people are born rich. That does not mean that, number one, the poor people have a right to go to the rich people and take away their money, because that's called theft. And second of all, it also does not mean that making individual good decisions does not allow the poor person to become rich. There's tremendous income mobility in the country even still. And so the idea is, if the idea is that your grandfather, your great-grandfather couldn't go to college because of the racism in the GI Bill after World War II, and that's why you flunked out of high school, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. make good decisions, you will get a better result. It doesn't mean we all start in the same place. We don't. None of us start in the same place. Some of us are smarter, some of us are dumber, some of us are taller, and some of us are shorter. That's the reality of life. That's just how the universe is. The question is what we do to better ourselves. And if the idea is that you get to take money from people who were not involved in your oppression in the first place in order to rectify something that happened to great-granddad, then we can play this game of historic grievance all the way down the line.
Okay. And if I could just ask one more
Sure.
question, would that be all right with you? You talk about social mobility. I think that's very important. It's what helped build this country. A lot of people of color are living paycheck to paycheck, and allows for very little room to move upward.
Yes.
How would you address that?
By less market regulation, by less regulation in housing, for example, let people build more housing, because that's what drives the price down, better supply of housing. By less government regulation and rent control, which leads to less supply of housing. By allowing businesses to start up and hire people without all of the licensing fees and taxes that are associated in the state of California, for example. With that, by getting rid of the minimum wage, because because the minimum wage puts half of the people who could get those jobs out of work. Right now, you put the minimum wage up at $15. College grads will be making the minimum wage, and all the people who are 17 jobs, they want to start working their way out of poverty, they will not get those jobs. No one's going to pay a 17-year-old kid to flip burgers. Right? It's not going to happen. So what you need, less regulation allows for more economic freedom, which is why in the past, when you had less regulation, you saw more social mobility. Social mobility slows as government sticks in the gears of the economy. This is why the inner cities, for example, areas that have been governed by Democrats have very little social mobility. You see permanent poverty, generation after generation, because no one is starting a business in the inner city because of regulations and taxes. This is what happened to Detroit, right? Detroit got completely cleaned out. Detroit was the industrial heartland of the United States. Through government subsidies, regulations, and high tax rates that confiscated property and wealth from the people who were generating it, all the businesses left. They raised the taxes again because they felt like they still owed people their money, so they raised the taxes again. More people left. They had no tax base. And so now Detroit is a center of permanent poverty and what looks like a zombie aftermath.
Hey, Benwan, thank you for coming. So I brought a liberal friend to come listen to you speak today.
Oh, good. That's nice.
She made me sit next to a Bernie Sanders supporter during a dinner, so...
Retaliation, yeah.
It's only fair.
Revenge.
So on the way over here, we got in a discussion about the wage gap between men and women.
Yes.
And she was saying that in a corporate setting even, that a woman entering the same time as a man is getting paid less for the exact same job. And since I was driving, I couldn't just stop and scream at her, but this is wrong. But what was your opinion on this?
I mean, it's not my opinion. It's statistical fact. This is bullshit. Okay, the 78 cents on the dollar myth is just that. It's a myth. Time magazine actually found as early as 2010 that in the 50 biggest cities in the United States, women were actually earning more than men. If they had the same job qualifications, the same number of years in the workforce, the same number of hours worked, the reason that women on average are paid less is because women take time off, they take less risky jobs, they don't take as much time at work, they would rather be home with their families. These are choices that women make, and it's astonishing to me that feminists actually degrade those choices as though it's a terrible thing when a woman takes time off. Well, it's her choice. I mean, I thought that was your whole deal. You know, my wife is a perfect example of this. My wife is a doctor, right? She's just graduating from UCLA Medical School. She finished all of her classes. She's just graduating in about 6 weeks. And she's due in 5, so we'll see if she's having our second baby in 5. So we'll see if she's able to walk up to the podium. But she took a year off during medical school because when we had our first kid, she wanted to take a year off to be with our first child, right? That was her choice. I took off 4 days, right? That's relatively typical because men are not the ones, you know, for a variety of reasons, including how much they want to do it. Men are typically not the ones in the home. And by the way, I'm speaking as somebody who, when I was growing up, my dad was a stay-at-home dad and my mom worked. Right, so I'm fine with whatever choices women want to make about work versus home life. I think there are certain choices that are more or less beneficial to the child. But to pretend that these discrepancies don't exist across the broad class of women is just not true. It's just not true. And it's not society's fault that women are given this, as Gavin McInnes says, this magical superpower of being able to create other humans, which is unbelievable and cool. Right, and it's now been seen as some sort of horrible affliction by so many women. It is the coolest thing literally on planet Earth from my perspective that women can do this. It's unbelievable. And and being able to recognize that and then say that women are able and free to make the choice to engage with that and enjoy it and be part of that, that's an aspect of freedom. So if women are being paid less on average, it's because women want to be paid less on average, and if they didn't, they would be in the workforce the same amount as men, and they would be 40, and they would be unmarried, and they wouldn't have kids, and they'd be miserable, right? Because men who do the same thing are generally 40, unmarried, don't have kids, and are miserable, right? So being a workaholic has its downsides, in other words, but the workaholics skew some of the statistics. And again, men don't have to take time off for childbirth. Men can't nurse unless you're Michael Moore. And it's... So that's the reason. Don't buy into the myth. If it were really true that women were paid so much less on average than men because there was this vast discrimination, then why wouldn't corporations, these greedy, evil corporations, the same ones that have the Scrooge McDuck money bins, why wouldn't they fire all the men and hire all the cheap women? Right? Why wouldn't they just staff up with women? They're willing to do the same work for 78 cents on the dollar. They don't do that. Why? Because it's not true.
Thank you. Looking for that.